want us to do two things, and this is my mandate as a futurist. We have to remember that we have to cast forward our idea about what MOOCs are and can be into the future, and we have to understand that the system that they're going to be a part of or becoming a part of is also changing.
When we reduce it down to what are MOOCs, I think the acronym says it all, but I particularly want to emphasize the first two letters. Massive is critical because it's about scale. New pedagogies emerge when you have a large group of learners and you no longer have the teacher as the central node, you have the teacher as a node as part of an overall network, but there's a lot of peer-based teaching that goes on. Secondly, the open aspect is critical because we're in a world now where knowledge generation and knowledge creation and advancing society requires that we can quickly connect without boundaries and barriers, and openness is critical to that.
The question really is, well, I'll use what Clayton Christensen, who's authored books on the topic of disruptive innovation, he would argue, and I think has argued, that MOOCs are an example of that, a great disruptor of an existing system. Pi, what do you think? Is this going to disrupt the system that you've known for so long?
No.
Okay.
You know, we've been discussing education all this time, and everywhere you go, there is dissatisfaction with education.
Dissatisfaction,
Dissatisfaction,
right? Okay.
Which means that progress, education in it, by its very nature, has to keep progressing. And progressing means improving on all sort of inputs and practices and all the rest of it. So when you look at that, MOOC becomes an input to the progressive movement of education. That is the way we conceive of education, the way we deliver it, and the result we expect to get. So it's not disruptive at all. It will be constructive in my view.
MOOCs are going to produce dramatic, substantial systemic change. Now, it might not be MOOCs. I mean, MOOCs is sort of just a placeholder word that reflects a lot of different trends, economic, geographic, technological. Today we call them MOOCs. 2 years from now we might call it something else. That doesn't matter. Those trends underneath it are the ones that are going to transform universities. And secondly, MOOCs are also a response to, probably the best way to look at it, they're part of a shadow learning economy. So, or another way is they are a supply-side solution to a demand-side problem around knowledge that's been building for decades. We've heard about the growing interest in a knowledge economy worldwide. We see at the US, 15% of the economy, according to a McKinsey report, is production jobs. Places like Germany is 25%, China it's 49%. But globally, work the way we've known it in the past is no longer traditional work, it's knowledge work. But universities, they've been completely ignorant, they've failed in responding to this transition. They don't realize that the profile of students entering education today is completely different than what it was even 15 years ago. So from my perspective, universities are on the cusp of dramatic and substantial change, and I think it's going to be by and large a very good thing. The drawback is a lot of educators have not paid attention to these trends, and the people who are driving the innovations are now, we're trying to create them as the enemy, the corporations and others. Well, it's our own fault we didn't innovate earlier.
You have to solve the problems of education mainly outside the sector of education. And this question of critical infrastructure that could promote the existence, the promotion of anything digital is important. Okay. Otherwise, in the less developed countries, you arrive at a situation where the machine is there, everything else is there, and the moment there's a problem, you have to wait for someone from New York or Singapore to come down to Kenya to repair them. And most importantly, the human element has to be taken into consideration. We don't wait till we've designed all the courses before sensitizing, or if you like, reorienting those who teach at the university level. Because the hardware is good, the software good, but the humanware is more important.
It's always the problem. But 2023, 10 years from now, more or less, what can the system look like with MOOCs in it?
I think what we're going to see is, first of all, a diversified education system. And the reason why the education system is diversified is because it's serving a broader range of students. Learning isn't a go to university, get a bachelor's degree anymore. It is a perpetual, you know, the acronym, we've heard it lifelong, life-wide. We've heard it for so long, we don't realize just how important that's starting to become. So I think learning is going to be increasingly connected to the digital devices around us, the Internet of Things. I believe that learning will occur across a variety of spaces in life, which means if you learn a particular task while you're volunteering, that's going to be captured in a competency profile that will then be connected to university studies that you're involved in and will be recognized. The learning will be a network. It'll be the web. You will learn in different spaces, different tools. You'll learn on your own. You'll learn with guided instruction. And the key issue, the key intelligence challenge that the education system faces going forward is how are we going to capture and validate that learning so that it serves a role like a traditional degree does today. But essentially we're going to have a fragmented, complex, multi-sourced, very diverse education system where the power relationships that we see today, I hope, will be completely reversed, where the learner will be central, the teacher will be secondary, and the education system itself will be third.
As Pai said, one of the major roles, one of the key roles of human beings in the system is to provide guidance, coaching, and mentorship. I think it will be less about delivering information and more about guiding you to what you learn. The sort of thing that George was talking about, where you have self-guided learning, mentorship in that process is vital. And my role within edX is very much at the intersection of technology and pedagogy. And the general way that we do this is we start with what we want to teach. Then we go into what's the best way to teach it. And then we break that up between what are things that we can do with existing technology, where can we build possibly innovative new technologies, where do we want a human aspect, how do we create those human aspects? Is it peer learning? Is it teacher-student learning? Having that kind of thoughtful process is completely critical to creating effective MOOCs. I think that open content and being able to customize content to local contexts, local languages, local curricula is absolutely essential in order to have, I think, what are good outcomes.
I just will add to the importance of enabling local capacity. Which is, I believe, critical. And that's one of the reasons why the development of MOOCs it is happening mostly in some parts of the world at this point. At the end of the day, what we need to make sure is that whatever is what we understand by education is relevant locally. Otherwise, we are going to be missing the point.
I strongly believe that the MOOCs are, for education, what the tablets have been doing for content delivery. I think we shouldn't look at the MOOCs as content delivery, even though that's what they are right now. But the MOOCs are part of a chain, and I think that's the missing link that we needed if we do our homework correctly to deliver not content, but full-blown diploma to students. Look at what Udacity you talked about and Georgia Tech are doing right now, delivering online the first master's degree for $7,000. Why would students from developing countries register to our universities instead of taking this degree for $7,000? Other universities are going to follow. So I think it's a much, much, much bigger disruption that we're expecting.
I view MOOCs as being a huge experiment, which means I don't look at the traditional metrics of success. I couldn't care less about dropout rates, because to me, they are an experiment. I'm trying to understand learning. What are people doing? Why are they not doing it? If they paid to be there, I would care about dropout rates. But so far, they clicked a button, and if they want that button clicked back, they can.
It is, of course, very important to learn something. Everybody's eager to learn something. But unless that learning is translated into something that then you can use to build your portfolio of competencies that eventually will make you more able to have a job or to produce jobs or to do something in the economic sector, still there will be resistance. And that's where I see sometimes that institutions behind MOOCs, higher education institutions behind MOOCs, sometimes looks like having an ambiguous perspective on these kind of things, because they are willing to offer the wisdom to the people, but not to offer the credit for that.
I personally wouldn't be terribly surprised if we see the development of a secondary system for accreditation and recognition that replaces part of the existing structure. I mean, we're in for a fairly interesting future, a very diversified knowledge needs, and universities or learning systems are going to provide a very diverse set of opportunities around that.
Technology gives us the means to transform and change the way in which we get people involved in learning. We democratize our society by creating a learning society. It isn't about universities selling degrees online and getting more money. It's about getting more people educated and involved in running the world.